Great.
So grateful to see you, John. It's so nice to be on with you again. So what do you have for us today?
All right. Well, it's been a month and it feels like it's been a lot longer than that. So this is a bit of a part two to what we talked about a month ago. So just as a brief review, if you didn't see last month's, go back and watch it. But as a brief review, last month I talked about three kinds of pain and how the response to each of these different kinds of pain, the difference in the response that's needed is really, really important. So accurate diagnosis of what kind of pain I'm in is crucial to being able to work through it. So just as a reminder, the three kinds of pain there's injury is imminent, which means stop what you're doing and don't do more of it, or you're going to get a lot more hurt. Pain equals growth. This is like the muscle burn, or I'm in physical therapy right now for some knee problems, and the exercises that I'm asked to do each day in my work with my physical therapist, it's full of pain, but it's not the kind of pain that feels like it's going to break something. It's the kind of pain that I know will build strength and stability and integrity. And then the third kind of pain I would say is pain is part of the deal. This is awkward, or this is hard, or this is always uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean that I'm doing it wrong or the situation is wrong. So I use the example of it doesn't matter how much death you see. Death is always one of those, it just hurts.
Mm-hmm.
I think of times where I have to really check my tendency to withdraw from my relationship and handle things on my own versus have a hard conversation. Hard conversations haven't gotten any easier. My faith in a good outcome has gotten stronger, but the ability to jump in and start the hard conversation has not gotten easier, because that's the nature of it. So the follow-up today is how do we, with knowledge of these three kind of pains, how do we fold this into growth and repair in a relationship? Just like if you want a healthy body, entropy or decay is the default setting of anything that's living. So if you want a healthy body, you have to work on it for your whole life. You can't rely on the natural health and fitness level that many people have in their 20s, because that's just how 20-year-old bodies work for the most part. You have to eat nutritious food on a regular basis. You have to work to keep your joints strong and healthy. And all of that involves pain and discomfort. Relationships are the same way. So today I'm going to talk about three phases of incorporation of pain, or three phases of response to pain. Only one of them is natural. The other two, we have to use our frontal lobes to think about and structure so that the pain that we experience in our relationships doesn't lead to entropy or doesn't just kill us. So the first stage of dealing with any kind of pain, I'd call it shock or survival. So this is when the wound is fresh. This is when the pattern is unfamiliar. This is when we experience something new, surprising, disorienting, or unexpected. We will default to our most base instincts when we're in surprise or shock. That's just how everybody's wired. So it doesn't matter if you have years of recovery or you meditate every day. Watch for this. Your gut response to stress is always going to be I wouldn't say the worst part of you, but maybe the oldest part of you. Oftentimes I know it's the least helpful part of me. An example of that, just earlier this week, it's my spouse and I, it's our 15th anniversary this year. And we're planning a big trip next month to celebrate. And our gift for the actual anniversary is we ordered some nice luggage. And of course, as it happens in my home, the luggage arrives and my boys, got it out and, had to look over every aspect of it. So one morning I'm up early with a baby and I see the luggage and I'm like, oh, I want to take a look at this. And so I get out the instructions for unlocking the lock the first time and I follow them and it doesn't unlock. And I try it on all of the suitcases we got. It doesn't work. So my default is one of my kids was doing what they shouldn't be doing. And, they didn't realize that they set a combination on this and nobody's going to remember the combination. And I'm pissed. And I went with that for about 15 minutes before I realized I don't actually know what's going on here. I should ask. So it's about the time that my boys wake up and I send a text to the family group text and I says, does anybody know the combination for the luggage locks? And my 10-year-old answers back, yeah, and he tells me the number. And I remember feeling like I'm really glad that I didn't follow my first plan, which was essentially to ambush whoever woke up first and just shoot all this anger at them. That's how it worked in my family of origin. That's my shock survival response to pain. So our default is always going to be our most base instincts. It falls into, a couple of broad responses. There will be hole up or freeze. There will be fight or run away or flee. So it's understandable when you're in the shock phase. And again, remember, shock is because it's new, surprising, disorienting, or overwhelming. Notice how most of those descriptors have to do with, I've never seen this before. I don't know what's going on. In my example of the luggage, the unique experience with the luggage, I hadn't seen that before, but the overall pattern for me, I have seen that a ton. And I've had both experiences of diving in on my first instinct and waiting for the next instinct to come along. I had enough experiences with those to eventually get wise and say, wait for a better idea to come up than your first one. So these responses are natural and they're biological. This is what I say. This doesn't require any frontal lobe engagement. This is naturally going to happen. Shock or survival. Generally, these reactions are followed by some kind of approach or withdraw tendency. So initially we might freeze. And then depending on how you're wired and what your experience is, you either come out swinging or you come out running. Generally, our initial response after the shock, it's not our best idea because our frontal lobe is problematic in two ways in the shock survival stage. First of all, it's problematic because it's offline in the initial. So we're not thinking through. We are reacting more from a limbic place, more from a body place, more from history. Then when your frontal lobe comes back online, often it's problematic in this phase because we overthink our responses. Well, I should say something, but if I say something, this person's going to get really mad or it's going to start a fight or on and on and on. And so our frontal lobe can actually prolong the shock and survival stage because it starts telling us that no option is a good option. And for the purposes of our discussion today, I would encourage you to think about the frontal lobe comes in and it's trying to help us find a pain-free way forward. That's my whole point of talking about this today. I'll just jump to the end right here. There is no way to avoid the pain when pain is part of the situation. So your frontal lobe will come in and say, don't do that, it'll hurt. Don't do this, it'll hurt. Don't stay still, it will hurt. So you get this like roiling up and there's nowhere for it to go. This is why recognizing the three types of pain is really important. When you can accept, yes, it's going to hurt, you might look at options through the lens of what kind of pain is that going to give me? So let's say that your partner or your spouse has a relapse and that causes a ton of pain. And you look at your options. There's the, I want to punch this person in the face and I'm so mad and I'm going to throw all their stuff on the front lawn and they'll be lucky if I don't set it on fire. That would be a going into pain. Now, is that the kind of pain that says growth is coming? Is that the kind of pain that says you keep doing this and you're going to break something? Is that the kind of pain that says it's just always awkward when you throw your partner's stuff on the front lawn and set it on fire. So when you're familiar with the 3 kinds of pain, you can start identifying the way forward and which type of pain you're going to choose. In a situation like that, the growth kind of pain is, I'm going to talk to my partner about this. And my goal in talking will be disconnected from their response. This will be about me setting a boundary. This will be about me stating my feelings. This will be about me saying, here's what needs to happen next for me, and here's what I would like to see happen next for you. That's growth pain. That's nature of the problem. It's just painful. So your frontal lobe will spin and spin and try to protect you from pain because that's its job. And one of the things that recovery teaches us, like Tammy was talking about before we started recording, life's just always hard. And one thing that recovery teaches us is there is no way that we can make it pain-free or struggle-free. So instead, we pick the way that we're going to take on the struggle. So the next phase of dealing with pain, and this is an optional phase. It doesn't come up naturally for us. I would call this growth or change or adaptation. This happens when we have an accurate perception of our pain and the source of the pain. And we start to think in either planful or intuitive ways about how to helpfully rearrange our relationship with the pain or the situation that brings up the pain source. So, for example, another insight into the Taylor home, we have 2 big dogs who most of the time I really, really love. And then there's other times like yesterday evening where we're saying to each other, why do we have dogs? So my wife goes downstairs to do a load of laundry last night and she yells up, it stinks so bad in the laundry room. What happened? We have a tortoise as well. And we have a sink in the laundry room, and that's where I clean out the tortoise's water dish. That's usually where the tortoise does his business. And if you haven't raised a reptile, when reptiles do their business, it stinks really bad. So you have to clean it often. And I said, I yelled back down, oh, I cleaned Rosie's water in there. Maybe I didn't flush it well enough, maybe turn on the water. And then she yells up about 2 minutes later, oh, I know why this stinks. There's a big pile of dog crap on the floor down here. When did that happen? So we discovered, for whatever reason, that our dogs think the downstairs is their backup bathroom. So with this source of pain that's been ongoing, we ended up installing a child gate at the top of our stairs because the dogs don't do that upstairs. They only do it downstairs, which is not uncommon for dogs. They get it in their head that bathroom is where they think it is. So that's how we dealt with that pain source. We rearranged the relationship. Dogs won't be downstairs unintended. Now, every now and then they slip down there because our 2-year-old, there's no such thing as childproof with her. She's figured out all the cabinet locks and she can open the gate whenever she wants. It's really great. It's an exercise in powerlessness for us. She must have let the dogs down and they did what they do. So the rearrangement of that relationship is, if we recognize this is how it works, we put up a gate, we put up a boundary, and for the most part, that keeps us out of pain. When that boundary breaks down, we reassess it. So we had a talk with everybody. Please be sure when you come up from downstairs that you lock the gate so that baby can't open it. This growth and change phase, it accepts that there's no quick way out, but it's a necessity to work through the pain. And again, this is where it's really helpful to be able to identify what kind of pain that I'm in. Because if the kind of pain you're in is the don't go forward or you'll break something, you can't work through it. You have to think of another way to go. Sometimes that means waiting. Sometimes that means getting stronger. Sometimes that means changing your perception. So again, like in the dog example, we used to look at, all right, we've got to come down on our dogs and we've got to train them better. No amount of training fixed that. And as we did research, we realized there are some reasons why no amount of training fixes that. So we just have to rearrange how our house works. There is a difference in growth and change. There are more relational or collaborative approaches. This is where 2 people may come together and say, you know what, we're at each other's throats all the time. What's happening? What are we missing? What are we going to do about it? What are both of us going to bring to the table? Those relational approaches work really well when both parties have a big buy-in for working together. Now, for those of you who are in recovery with a partner, you can probably attest those relational moments, they don't come along often and they're really hard to get to. So then there's also single or individual approaches. That's where I'm going to have a boundary. And my boundary necessitates that I have to choose between the boundary that I need and your comfort. So sometimes the growth or change phase involves we're not moving together. And that's by one or both of our choice. So because we're not moving together, I have to do what I have to do. And that may mean that over time, we grow so far apart that repair is really hard. So if you find you and your partner in a divergent growth pattern, there's two things to ask. First of all, are we actually working together in our growth? Or have we taken the pain avoidant approach, maybe the pain avoidant approach, and said it's just easier if I do it on my own? And maybe you'll get the idea and come along versus facing the pain. I was working with my men's group this week, and the guys had a recognition. They said, oh gosh, what were they talking about? They said, I think that it's easier to not work with a partner. And I said, yeah, it is. And they said, I don't think doing the easy thing is always the best thing. And I said, it's not. If there's a divergent relationship or there's a divergent growth pattern in your relationship, you may want to look at what's the pain we're avoiding that doesn't allow us to pick a path together. Or it could be there is an injury or there's a setup in our relationship that doesn't let us bend that way. And it's not movable. If we keep trying to go that way, we'll break something. Maybe there's an irreconcilable difference. That can actually be collaborated on as well. So we make growth, in the growth and change phase, we make the growth the priority, not the pain avoidance. So think about this in your early days of recovery when you started to get it. I was talking with a guy yesterday, and he was talking about how he likes meetings, but he can't find any that are at a convenient time. And I said, well, that's going to be really hard for you then, because if you're waiting for the world to arrange around your schedule, I don't think you'll get this benefit. And one of the things that he talked about is early on in recovery, he said, I was really connecting with this. I don't care what it takes. I need what this is offering. He says, I lost that. And I need to get back to that. And we talked to him, I talked with him about his experience in the meetings he was going to. And he said, there's not a lot of hope. There's not a lot of sobriety. There's a lot of talking about problems and no solutions. And I said, maybe you haven't gone to good meetings. And so one of the commitments he made is that he was going to try, he was going to expand his search for meetings, and he was going to try to find some that felt more worth, there's something here for me. So again, as you deal with that, what's going on for me now, as you deal with the pain, you may find a better solution. And it's going to be hard for him because he's got to meet new people and he's going to have to inconvenience himself. But I think we'll see how things are next week. I think he's got the motivation to lean into some pain to make some growth happen. The last phase of our relationship with pain, I would say, is maintenance. Notice how maintenance doesn't come between shock and growth, because I really don't think there's a middle ground until you have a plan. It's shock to continue having the waves hit you and you're not rearranging your relationship with the source. So maintenance is after change has happened, after growth has happened. It takes work to maintain our gains. So there are no problems that are permanently solved, not with living organisms. even with non-living organisms. My car was in the shop all week. It's the first time I've had to have it in 9 years, because it's older and it's getting mileage on it, and water pumps go out and oil pumps go out. And it was really interesting. When I saw the maintenance required light go on, I thought, I don't have time to take this in and get it diagnosed. If it starts making funny noises, that's when I'll bring it in. And that's what happened. It started making funny noises. It started running really rough. And so it was, all right, priorities are priorities. Whatever it takes, we're getting this fixed. That's maintenance. I could have kept driving it and created a crisis, and then I would have had no car or thousands and thousands of dollars in repair. Maintenance requires work. Maintenance is inconvenient. But I would much rather have a week without a car than have to buy a new one. So pain can return due to our neglect or disuse. We learn lessons through our engagement with pain. It's really easy to forget those lessons when we're not in pain anymore. So maintenance requires an ongoing recognition of long-term problems without living in them. So it's the recognition of the long-term problems with an appropriate context. So when it comes to recovery, it can be recognizing I'm always just a step or two away from a spectacular relapse. Right now, my track record says I'm leaning away from relapse, not towards it. So that's not always beating yourself up and saying I'm just a step or two away of being awful and I really ought to be in a jail cell or someone ought to be keeping an eye on me. It's a recognition that I have this in me, and here's where it's at right now. And that's where our relationship with pain in recovery, we do things like continue to go to meetings. We continue to work with a therapist. We continue to have the hard conversations with our partner on the issues that we have fought about forever, because there's always going to be issues between two people, but we talk about it so that it doesn't have to turn into a gigantic explosion. Maintenance, I think, is an intentional leaning into the kind of pain that means that I don't get growth without pain. Leaning into the kind of pain that there are certain parts of living my life in a responsible, integrated way that are just awkward. There's no easy way to do it. My summation of the message from this week and last week is that not all pain means you should avoid. There's in my book, there's one kind of pain that means you'll avoid. And if you stop and think about your relationship with your body, you can actually identify that kind of pain. You could probably identify that with your emotions too, but our mind plays tricks on us, especially when we've had a life full of pain. Our knee-jerk reaction can be, if there's any kind of hurt involved, I don't want anything to do with it. And as part of our growing, maturing, recovering process, I think we owe it to ourselves to become PhDs in our pain, so that we can know when it's time to push, when it's time to accept that there's a struggle, and when it's time to say the best thing for me is actually to sit on the sideline right now and wait for a better option.
Great stuff. There's so much, and I've got notes as always, but Kristen Snowden's was talking about healthy relationships and growth and all of that. So I feel like there's this connection with the webinars this week on, there is opportunity for growth, and there's going to be some pain associated with that growth. But, I wrote down a bunch of things, but, when you're talking about maintenance, I was like, the 12 steps has maintenance steps, so maintenance is key to how we. So yeah, is my addiction always there? I have a daily reprieve. If I do, we talk in the big book about an easier, softer way. And as addicts, we always look for the easier, softer way. In recovery, for me, the easier, softer way is keep doing the things that I know work. So you talked about, people that, step away from, the things that are working. I shared on something that not too long ago, but I was like, addiction is the only thing where we go, yeah, that worked really well for me, so I'm going to quit doing it. I mean, like, it's just the insanity of our disease that we go, yeah, I was doing meetings, I was sponsoring people, I was doing all of these things. So I quit doing that, and then all of a sudden things are painful again and, problematic. So, and then we're kind of going, how did that happen? And so it's fascinating to me, but it's also a good reminder for me that, those are the warning lights on my car. It's like if I'm taking care of steps 10, 11, and 12, that means having done 4 through 9. I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and he had relapsed, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I came in and I did steps 1, 2, 3, and 12." And I was like, oh, there's in between stuff, and people avoid them because they can be painful, but they're also where we do the house cleaning, and they're the freedom. So what I was thinking of with this talk is, yes, there's some pain associated with doing all of this, but the freedom, like even talking about the luggage, I was like, wow, that is such a, what a shift. Because yes, the natural reaction is to, raise heck through the house of like, wake everybody up. Why would you even wait till they get up? Just wake them up and, ask them for, I mean, but that reaction, I wrote that in capitals because I was like, I lived in reaction rather than in being able to be intentional and, and thinking things through. So having the ability to make a shift and go, how is this going to work for me, in the long run. I listened to an interesting podcast not too long ago about physical pain, and there's such a mental component to it, like because your physical body, it still sends a message to the brain that there's pain. And I thought, wow, if we learn to do things differently, with these scary things, even when you're talking about the prefrontal cortex, you can get into the stall of like, don't do anything because all of them are going to be scary. I hadn't thought of that. I would think our brain is going to tell us what to do, because we're going to think it through and we're going to seek out the right answer and all that. But I hadn't thought about, oh yeah, no, everything is bad, everything is scary, so just don't do anything. And I think fear, fear of pain, even not real pain, but fear of pain, can keep us from, making choices that will move us forward. But Kristen talked about the other day, you have to know what your goal is. What is the end goal? And I think with all of this, if you want growth, if you want a healthy relationship, if you want to live life differently, then we will experience some pain. And in addiction, I love that your guys went, easier is not always better, like that's growth, for an addict, because in addiction, we're always avoiding the pain, we're numbing out, we're escaping, we're avoiding all emotions, good and bad, in addiction. So to have them go, oh, wait, easier isn't always better. Yeah, it's easier not to be in a relationship. The problem with that is no matter where you go, there you are, so you're still taking you with you. And if we in addiction believe that we're the source of our problems, the good news is we can also create the path forward to be, on a different path for ourselves and others too. So yeah, really, really interesting to think about different aspects of pain and the ones to decide to choose to lean into and experience growth. And I even appreciate that some of them will always be awkward. Yes, death, even if it's coming, like, and that person, it's like, it's for the best, it's, whatever, that still is, it's still is pain. So.
Yeah, that reminds me of an experience my wife and I had in marriage therapy several years ago. I won't go into all the details, but as we were working on something that we both avoided, she said, after I had shared, a vulnerable feeling, she said, oh, I guess I'll just have to put on my big girl pants then and learn how to deal with it. And to me, that was a raising of the bar for us. And I think about that all the time when our path forward, as it often is through pain. I say to myself, I'm just going to have to put on my big boy pants and, belly up to the bar and face what this is. Because I think most people, their tendency is to avoid. Mine is like, I feel like it's like 300 times more intense than the average person to avoid. But that acceptance that whatever's coming next, it's going to be hard. I'm going to have to dig deeper within myself to do something that I'm not naturally inclined to do. I'm going to have to hold on through some discomfort. And like I said, the initial action has never gotten easier. My connection with the hard thing is a lot of times the most helpful thing. That has gotten stronger. So I go in with just as much struggle, but a little more confidence that it will end up okay.
I think that is really huge what you're just talking about. And I think when you're talking about your wife is going, okay, I'm going to put on my big girl pants, and you're putting, like, you guys have a shared vision of, we're in this together and we're going to work on making it better. And it's not just you're doing this and you're doing that, and and why don't you, so that shared vision of what is our goal. If our goal is to have, a strong relationship, be supportive of each other, then we are going to have to show up and do some things that are, uncomfortable, even painful. But if it's for the greater good of our relationship, and you have a family, so it's not just the two of you, it's the entire family unit is, benefits from that. You talked about collaborating on irreconcilable differences. So uh, can you expand on that? And if you guys have questions, please type them in the Q&A. Would love to have Jon attend to those. But like, when you're talking about collaborating on irreconcilable, if they're irreconcilable, is it kind of like what you're talking about with, I just have to accept this kind of? Tell me
Yeah.
more.
Um, the one indicator that couples would have a hard time making it happily is that their values are too far apart.
Oh, okay.
And that happens. There's not a right set of values for humankind. There's a lot of different configurations, and sometimes we discover that our values are too far apart. And when we're doing the pain avoidant thing, what we'll do is try to hammer a solution into our partner, or we'll use withdrawal and disdain to hope to draw them out towards us. And the collaborative approach to irreconcilable differences is the hard conversations around, what, I don't know that we can give each other what we need. What are we going to do about that? I always remember this couple I worked with several years ago. There was infidelity. That's why they came to me. And it was just, it was a year of like some of the most hellacious couple sessions I've ever done. And one day I asked them down the middle, I said, do you two even want to be married? And I don't even know if I'd asked that before. I just assumed in therapy. And they both looked at each other and they both broke down and they said, no, I don't want to be married to you anymore.
Oh, wow.
And it was heartbreaking for everybody. Fast forward a few years in the future, the wife reached out to me for ongoing therapy. And we were talking and she said, guess who it is I talk to every day? I said, who's that? And she said, her ex. And she said, our marriage got in the way of our friendship. Our marriage got in the way of being good parents together. And she said, yeah, there's still some hurt from the past, but I'm so glad we figured out the arrangement we needed to have. So, because I really do like him as a person. He likes me as a person. And most importantly, we wanted to raise good kids together, and we weren't able to do that because of our marriage.
Wow.
So please don't misunderstand this. I don't think divorce is always the like, if we can't work it out, then we have to get divorced. But there are some parts of our expectations we have to let go of and rearrange. And that's what I mean by collaborating on irreconcilable differences. If all we're looking at is, well, the only way forward is together in this way, we may limit solutions down to the ones that aren't right for us or right for our partner. So it's really painful. Like in that moment when I asked them, do you two even still want to be married? That was a really painful place to go. But they were both very brave in going there and exploring that. And that was the kind of pain that opened the door to the growth that they couldn't get at any other way.
Wow, I'm glad I asked that question. I'm tearing up. Okay, so here's an irreconcilable difference. If you had asked them and one of them said yes and one of them had said no, I mean that feels irreconcilable too. I mean, what do you do in that kind of situation?
Yeah, so it's not uncommon in a coupleship that we want different things or that we need different things. One person wants to move in and the other one doesn't. Um, when I'm working with couples, this is the therapist approach, we have to slow it down and talk about why is that and what does that mean for both of you? And again, we have to stay out of the like, well, let me hammer what I want into you. Let me make you see it my way. We have to move from there's one solution, there's one right solution, and we've got to make each other do it into, well, let's open up the playing field then and let's explore where that leads us. Is there
I
any,
find, oh, go ahead.
is there any way forward together you two can come up with? What does that mean that I want and you don't?
And I think I find that if I'm curious about, tell me what that means for you and to you, it isn't just like, this hammering things in, like you should see it my way type of thing. But, if you have the ability to communicate, this is why this is so important to me. And if I'm curious, I'm not coming from a place of invalidating the other person. I'm truly looking to understand.
Yeah. Yeah, and that I think true understanding is often way more painful than we're willing to do initially. I watched this with a couple just before I logged on to the webinar today. They actually did a really good job at compassionate understanding, and I watched as they were doing that. There's a lot of pain coming up for both of them. And what they decided to do with that today is, instead of like getting themselves and one another out of pain fast, they decided to listen to it. And they got more truth on the table than they ever had before. Again, it's recognizing, like I said, my last thought there was, not all pain means avoid. Some of it actually means we'll lean into that stretch. What's that connected to? In my physical therapy with my knee, I've always, like, any time I've had knee problems for most of my adult life. Anytime I've gone to a doctor or a physical therapist, they've always recommended hamstring stretches. And it wasn't until physical therapy a couple of weeks ago, where the physical therapist was supporting my leg in a hamstring stretch, where I could feel the connection between the tendon in my knee and my entire hamstring. And it was super painful to lean into that. And in the beginning, all I was paying attention to was, wow, this hurts. And as I breathed and I felt the pain, I could feel the connection. And now, in my mind, it's no longer this, oh yeah, I got to remember to stretch my hamstrings. It's like, that's the first place I go anytime something feels off in my leg, because I can feel the connection there. And when it comes to our relationships and emotion, that's what compassionately leaning into pain does, is we start to see how things connect. And that changes how we perceive the relationship. It changes the options we give ourselves.
In that example, I hate foam rolling, and I've had sore quads. And so I was like, get the foam roller out, like, because I know it's going to help. But I think just having the vision that I know this is going to be painful. I know that I'm not going to like it in the moment, but I also know that this is ultimately going to give me more relief than if I don't do it, so that's having that vision of, like, if I want, like you were talking about with a couple right before this, like if they are willing to sit in the pain enough that they can work through it, that's not just the surface, band-aid stuff.
So some stuff in early recovery, just to, really directly bring it home to the audience here. And by the way, if you have any questions, put it in the Q&A. In early recovery, there's things like, I think every partner has to confront, what are the details I want to know? And not just want to, but what do I need to know in order to make a choice and be safe? And oftentimes that ends up putting you in a position where you feel like you might as well be in front of the firing squad. But again, there's this like, there's no easy way out of this. And there's already pain everywhere. I really have to zero in on what's the kind of pain I need to listen to, what's the kind of pain I need to respond to. For addicts early in recovery, I just recently did a disclosure, so I have disclosure on the mind. There's the whole like, it always sucks when I tell someone the truth about what's going on for me. There's always a ton of shame. Showing up at meetings and saying I'm Bob and I'm an addict, like that never gets easier. For a lot of addicts early in recovery, I think I don't remember where this is in the big book, but there's that line, we decided enough was enough. For addicts early in recovery, that's, I think, the big existential decision we come to is, am I going to keep living this way? Am I going to keep running rather than facing? Am I going to keep avoiding? Am I going to keep doing the easy thing rather than the right thing? Because a lot of times those aren't the same thing. And again, there's this rearrangement with the relationship with pain. In addiction, we spend our whole life, we're organized around avoiding pain. And in recovery, it's not that we learn the real ways, the healthy ways to avoid pain. It's that we accept that pain is part of life. It's that we accept that despite our best efforts, things go wrong. We don't get the reactions that we want. And our commitment in recovery is to stay present with that instead of escaping. And again, for a lot of the addicts that I work with, one of the accepting the pain touch point is when my partner is triggered, they'll be angry with me. It will hurt to listen. My ego will be wounded. Even my like sense of who I am will be challenged. That's always hard. And I get the right frame up on that where I can understand that this may not just be about, giving me my licks and sending me on my way. There might actually be value in this for me and my partner. So I'll fight almost every instinct I have, and I'll stay present and I'll listen. And that doesn't mean that everything that a partner throws at their addicted spouse is fair game. Sometimes it's not. And sometimes another choice needs to be made. But again, what choice do I need to make? That comes from orienting in the shock and survival stage and starting to look for patterns and starting to look for, okay, what's the source of this pain? Where is it coming from? And how do I need to rearrange my relationship with that pain source? I can make it my teacher, or I might have to recognize that's actually not pain that's coming out, that's rage. And that goes for partners and their addicted partner as well. Sometimes what you are being given is not your partner's pain, it's their avoidance of the pain. It's their avoidance of the issue. And so in that shock and survival stage, that's why we work on grounding. It's really important to breathe and think and take time after to go through and process, because you need to start seeing patterns. You need to start seeing sometimes the merry-go-round, and that's when you can start making decisions about how to change it.
Yeah, I agree that, it's like when somebody relapses, I'm like, do the autopsy on the relapse, because you didn't relapse at the moment when you acted out. It was 2 days ago when you were going, gosh, I'm doing so good and I can skip that meeting or I can do whatever. It's like there's always the backup, but if you have a plan, like I'm going to be triggered, things are going to happen, there's going to be pain, and if I plan for that, then I have the ability to do something different. I also think in addiction we numb out the pain, but we also numb out the joy, we numb out the connection, we numb out everything. We are numb. It's not so refined that it's going to take away all the pain and it's going to give us all the joy. No, it takes everything.
So I learned something this last week. It's like the simplest concept ever, but it's revolutionized our understanding of how the brain works. It's called opponent processes, which
Okay.
means that many of the ways that your brain interacts with the world, it's in this, like you think about a teeter-totter, like pleasure, pain is an opponent process. Approach, withdraw is an opponent process. And so you can't disconnect one from the other because they
Mm.
different sides of the teeter-totter. So if you're trying to lock pain out, essentially push down on that side of the teeter-totter so it can never come up, it's not like we put joy in the air and joy is always up. We actually encourage our brain to press down on the joy side because it's not working the way that it should. They're supposed to be.
Ah.
So what we do to cope to avoid pain in the short term may work really well, but in the long term, it may actually increase the amount of pain that we're in and our tendency to get stuck there, because we're essentially your brain's always going to grind through and work the way that it needs to. You can't alter these biological processes. So the more your frontal lobe messes with it, the more you're going to induce your brain to do extremes.
Oh, wow.
So the avoidance of pain, again, initially, it may have gotten you something. Over time, it may actually increase your susceptibility to pain, because your brain is going to weight things in the direction of, we've had a lot of this pleasure, where's the other side?
I also found for myself that I had no tolerance for any level of emotion. It was all dysregulating. It all felt so intense and overwhelming. Even what now I would look at as, a mild, emotion, negative or positive, but it, like, I was so checked out that it just felt like I couldn't even cope with that. So, to me, I removed everything and removed all my capacity to be able to deal with any kind of emotion.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a, like I said, there's a neurological underpinning for that. That's not just a theory. It's actually how it works. You can't shut down one part of your experience without shutting down all parts of your experience.
Yeah. Well, this has been delightful. We don't have any, if anybody had any questions, we would welcome them. But I think this has been so interesting. It's been great to see you. Thanks everyone for joining. This will be posted on the Seeking Integrity website under the previously recorded webinar. So check it out. And Jon referenced the part 1 of this, so I would invite you to go back and check that out as well. So thank you.
Great to see you, Tammy.
Bye-bye.